Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Welcome to the Brothers of Liberty. This episode will be about the media, just kind of an in-depth discussion about how crazy they are, how far do they go, and how far have they gone. Dun dun dun. Today's with us just Kyle, or Cody. Kyle's being a little bit lame right now, so...
I am not Kyle, alright?
How you doing? How you doing, Cody?
Man, sometimes I feel like the Cartman of this group.
Well, today's just going to be a quick hitter episode, so we're just going to have a quick little discussion and just go into it. So, Cody, what do you think about the media?
I think we are currently in a reversion to America's defining media culture, where we're going back to what made American media great before the invention of radio and FDR's prodding into it. So I don't know if you know much of the history of American media back when it was just like newspapers and articles and stuff like that, but it is always very, very partisan and very, very political. It's also very localized in a lot of cases, right? But 1800s, you'd have like the Richmond Whig, or like Democrat specific papers and Republican or Whig specific papers and stuff like that, right?
Owned by specific politicians too. So
yeah, they heavily agreed with all of this stuff. And one of the things that broke us out of that was actually FDR. When radio was invented, they created this new government agency to effectively govern and censor it, right? And to make sure that people distributed wavelengths right, so that you didn't have this mishmash of people, dealing with this weird, crazy stuff, that they never dealt with. It's a new frontier of media, and it created a couple things. One of them in particular was called the Fairness Doctrine, which was an actual legal requirement that if a news outlet spent an hour on pro-life, they would have to spend an hour on pro-choice. If they spent an hour on gun control, they would have to spend an hour on pro-2A. Well, about midway through Reagan's time, he got rid of that. And what you slowly started to see after that is partisanship take over our normal respected media. And it hasn't been in a lot of our collective conscious anything other than Fox being right-wing until the last, I would say, 5 years, when we really started to see the bias of places like CNN and MSNBC and all that, where MSNBC might have been, thought of as a little liberal, but still good. Well, now we're starting to see the outright partisanship of all of it.
They are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
And I think the emergence of competition, again, because another thing that's also not that widely known is we used to have like 50 some odd media companies or more, where each individual local area would have its own media company that owned it. Like back in the days of like Anchorman, right? But then slowly over time, we now have 5 or 6 major ones. And Fox was actually only made in the late 90s because Rupert Murdoch realized that there is this entire section of the market of conservatives or right-wing people, Republicans, that weren't getting represented in the media. And once the Fairness Doctrine got killed in like 88 or something like that, he was like, all right, I'm gonna make this. And then Fox News with O'Reilly and Hannity and stuff like that, because Hannity's been on there the whole time, that's when they came into being. Well, so now across the country, every local news agency is some Fox outlet, ABC outlet, NBC outlet, CNN outlet, one of those things, right?
Yeah.
And now that they've really started to show their partisan gap, and you know, it used to be like, oh, I'll go to Fox for the right, MSNBC for the left, and CNN for the middle. I don't think we have nonpartisan media anywhere anymore.
There is no middle. So
I mean, there have been a few things online of emergences of these things that are going to be nonpartisan and just show the news, which originally was how like the New York Post and the New York Times and stuff like that got their creation, is because they were, you had these things that were called yellow papers, which were basically partisan hack newspapers. Well, they wanted to create, this elite level of integritous journalism. And so they started creating these ones. And I think we're starting to see a reversion of that, because one of the things that I think is a problem now that is definitely kind of coming into focus, or will slowly come into focus, even more so for the average person, is that the media is full of shit. Right? I mean, even Fox News has taken an absolute hammering by conservatives in the last, since the election, because they basically dropped Trump like a hot freaking potato instead of, acknowledging the stuff that their partisan base wanted to hear. And it's not even, they didn't even need to do things like, overly emphasize or get into it. They could have just said, while everybody else says there's no evidence, the people from the Trump campaign view these glitches, this, the high rates of the, blah, 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 as evidence. These are the kind of things that are coming in these Trump lawsuits. If they had just simply done that, like with Neil Cavuto and all those kind of people, because like Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Tucker have kind of talked about it, but their actual news agents have not, and it's pissed a lot of people off, and that's why you see like Newsmax and One America News are also skyrocketing.
I think what's been really apparent too is how even little late night shows and little political shows tend to go with that bias as well. It was funny. I was watching this is quite a while ago, like 5 years ago, when the 2016 election was going around. I was watching that show Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and they portrayed
John Oliver. He is like, okay, keep going.
They portray themselves as partisan, but that they will try to do objectivity and stuff, and give their facts out there, although they clearly have one perspective. And they did one. They did one on yeah, I know, but the show started turning. I think they started running out of topics, to be quite honest with you. And they did one on Hillary Clinton and Trump, and about the election and all the presidential candidates. And it was funny because all they could find on Trump was, the Trump school, and then the Trump school, and then he used his charity to buy a picture of himself and a painting of himself, and I was just like, okay. And then they talked about Hillary, and were basically just like, yeah, she's got scandals after scandals after scandals after scandals. I made up this one scandal and you thought it was true because it was a scandal. And then basically at the end just said that, just because Hillary's got a bunch of scandals doesn't mean that Trump doesn't have all these little scandals, and there's a bunch of raisins, and then had raisins drop down onto the actual set itself. And I was just like, you've literally just pointed out, like, aggressively so, that Hillary's pretty fucking corrupt in every single fucking way.
And she's got so many scandals that people could make them up and you'd easily believe them because of how, like, corrupt she is.
Yeah, and you made that point, and then you said, well, you should still vote for her because Trump's the evil orange man. And I'm just like, huh.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that's because, so, you and I grew up in an era where, and this is a lot of our generation, where we used to watch the Colbert Report and Jon Stewart Tonight. And Jon Stewart was actually way better. But that was during the Bush era, right? And
I think he at least attempted to be fair. think that's
Jon Stewart attempted to be fair. He would give credit where credit was due, and Colbert was just extreme satire humor, where Jon Stewart was more of the left, and Colbert would pretend to be on the right, and stuff like that. And it was just funny. But then, Colbert has continued his shtick, and he's gone on to like a real late night show and not just Comedy Central. And he's continued, and now he's gone from being funny, because effectively what happened is, so like I said, it was the 80s, end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s when the Fairness Doctrine went away. So it took the 90s, back when we had our last stable decade, is what it seems, was when people were like slowly stretching their legs and pushing those norms. And it was, we didn't really have the partisan hackery. And then you had Fox come on the scene, or we didn't see the partisan hackery, but it existed. You had a lot more of the like real left versus right shows like CNN's Crossfire and stuff like that when Tucker was on it. And and we didn't really start to see it. And then Bush happened. And 9/11, and then the Iraq War, and everybody kind of used that whole Bush era. And that was also like during when, like gay marriage really became a hot topic. And the left really, really leaned into calling the right, homophobic, racists and stuff like that. And so you had this Bush era, and people were just going like, I don't like Republicans, blah, 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 blah. Well, then we got to Obama, and everybody was rallying behind Obama because America's first black president. The dude's first campaign, like, you have to admit, like, he came across as this like great politician. The things he talked about, like balancing the budget, working with the system, but having liberal ideals, not being too crazy, ending wars. And then he proceeded to have one of the most, horrible scandal-ridden presidencies that nobody wanted to talk about. So the media utterly refused to talk about everything going on with the Obama years. So what that created is, Stewart retired because he's like, I'm not going to make fun of the black guy and talk about all this shit going on. And we're losing our audience because people wanted to hear me make fun of Bush. And then Colbert moved on to normal TV at some point, or it was a lot easier for his shtick of like being fake right wing to come in. And then you came into Trump, and that's when it really started to become obvious to me that these people were full of shit. Like Jon Stewart was the last good, like, liberal comedian gatekeeper that was willing to be fair for everybody. And that was even no more so present than when he actually came out and was like, no, Trump did a good job taking care of the 9/11 victims fund. But then you got this media runoff that for the last 4 years, the little dichotomy of Stewart and Colbert broke into, now you've got like 5 TV shows that are like basically Comedy Central, and all they do is make fun of Trump, and people just turn in to hear these people make fun of Trump because they've been convinced to not like Trump. And then you have now that Trump's out, what are they going to make fun of? No, they're going to crash again. It was just like because of the news media, other than Fox's inability and unwantingness to go after Obama and to report on anything that Obama was doing, they were dying. Like before Trump, CNN, MSNBC, all this stuff, they were dying. They were losing money, losing viewership. The only people that were holding on was Fox. Because, you couldn't go into the same thing, over and over again. Obama's great. Obama's great. And it's like, yeah, we get it. We've been told for the last 8 years that Obama's great, but we're still bombing people in the Middle East. Like, what's going on? The economy slowed down. Like, what's going on? And then in the Trump era, because Trump is such a character, it has created this entire, Trump-based media. And now I think because, if assuming he loses all of his lawsuits and all this kind of stuff, the mainstream media is going to collapse, in my opinion. Fox has pissed people off. They're going to struggle. CNN, AT&T is looking at selling CNN. MSNBC is going to might stick around a little bit, but all these other shows, they're going to lose the power and the money that they were getting through the Trump years. And I think it's also slowly waking a lot of people up. And I think another thing that's going to wake people up is the fact that they've been told all this good stuff. And they, basically people have been activated to hate Trump on all this stuff. Well, then they're going to, come into the Biden years and, maybe the Democrats, liberals will quash down, but the independents that got rallied to hate Trump, they're going to start watching the news and they're going to be like, well, what's going on? Like you just barely mentioned the fact that we started bombing another country, and then they're going to look for other news, and then they're going to be like, wait, the Biden regime fucking sucks. And then they're going to see people, then they're going to end up turning on other media to figure out what's going on. Because, once you get politically activated, it's very hard to shut down. Right? Like once you start becoming aware, it's very hard to shut down. And I also think going into the future with a lot of this absolute BS fakery that happened in these elections, because the Republicans dominated everywhere, other than these specific cities. That's weird. It was only in these cities that also all of them did this thing where they said, we're going to stop counting at midnight and then kick everybody out and then immediately start counting again when no one was here. And all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of votes popped up. And then I think it's also going to be the same thing that we always see where once, there's going to be a hardline stance now, and then here rolling into the future a little bit, there people are going to start to see news articles that actually talked about no, it turns out we found a lot of bad systemic problems. So I really think right now, you just had 73 million people motivated to vote for Trump. And a lot of those were former independents and a lot of those were former liberals, the 10 million extra people who voted for him this go round. Those people are seeing what's happening right now. And then they're also going to pay attention to what's going to be happening under Biden, and they're going to stay activated.
It's going to be interesting.
You're not going to get, 75 million people to come out and talk and vote for a Democrat again. You're just not. The next elections, I think, these strongholds. What's up, bud? Just doing a quick recording, and then I'm going to go back and do my thing. Okay. I already got through all the chapters. I'm just rereading definitions. But I think you're going to see these strongholds. The formerly blue wall are going to come out in mad revenge, and they're going to be activated to get their politicians to change the election laws. Because a lot of these states, Michigan has a Republican Congress. They just have a Democrat's governor. Same kind of thing is going on in Pennsylvania. You're going to see these people are going to come out and vote again, and the laws are going to get changed. That's why, in Florida, their shit got counted so goddamn fast because the laws got changed after 2000 and stuff like that.
Well, since we're on the topic of the election real quick, is your thoughts changed on who's going to win?
I've said from the beginning, because of, and this is going with the media too, kind of like a quasi thing where you have the media is going all in on this, and you see if you objectively look at what is going on, even if you don't think that there is enough, there's evidence of enough voter fraud or systemic failures to change the election results, you look at what's going on and go, wow, this looks dirty. And you see everything going on all in. This is kind of going to be the culmination where I think we have Biden win, but it destroys the party. I think the Democrats are going to split themselves. I think the Republicans are already showing signs that they're about to say, nah, fuck it, we're going to go populist. And I think that's going to change this whole, political and media landscape for the future. Because I kind of wavered off of the media conversation. I think we're going to see the media collapse. Because I think they're losing their power because nobody trusts them anymore. You know, conservatives don't trust media, liberals trust media. Well, I think coming into the Biden administration, we're going to see liberals stop trusting media again.
Mhm.
Because you still see liberals that are going, Biden's going to stop the wars. It's like Trump was stopping the wars. And then when Biden, they are already talking about basically going back to the old foreign policy and bombing people again.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to wake up, and I just think it's really funny because it's you have like diehard Democrats that are going, oh, you know, I was reading this neocon think piece, and I think we should be interventionists now.
Mm-hmm. Some people.
To me, that's hilarious.
I don't think what's funny is like I think in the last couple of days I've kind of been more thinking about. I think Trump actually has a very solid chance, surprisingly. I don't know. Every single day that passes, every single day every single day that passes, and it's not even just like all these votes coming out, and you know they find like basically 3,000 votes every single day for these recounts in Georgia. It's just betting markets,
and that's without signature verification.
Exactly. So that's why I'm just like, interesting.
Well, and I think the question of, well, why are you trying to get rid of signature verification on ballots? Like, people, have this eyes wide shut thing of, well, it disenfranchises voters, but then when you go, okay, tell me how it disenfranchises voters.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, then, people will have to, they won't get their vote counted because their stuff changed. It's like, then why don't we make it so all mail-in votes have to be in 2 weeks before the election so that people can go through them and, contact people and have them fix their signature and send it back in? And stuff like that, especially because that people are going to be utterly bombarded with, hey, you understand that like Canada did an election in the middle of the pandemic with, in-person votes and IDs and stuff like that, and they didn't have a problem. Why is it that every single time miraculously, because Facebook and social media and all this stuff is just going to be an absolute slaughter fest, especially if Biden wins, with all of these investigations that are going to continue to happen, and all these people that are going to continue to look into it, but yeah, like you're saying, the betting markets and stuff.
And not even just the betting markets. All Trump really needs is just a couple lawsuits on some specific technicalities, and everything's been trending in that direction because apparently Democrats and a lot of people can't really, rig an election well. They can't hide anything very well, and if I'm gonna be quite honest.
I think they did it well, but
should have just burned those ballots. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's. I think it's going to come down to the 14th Amendment is finally going to apply to elections, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I think people are underselling because Trump's entire thing is the 14th Amendment is equal protection for voting. You can't have these separate systems where people's votes are counted on separate days and people's votes come in later, because if you're going to accept mail-in votes later, then people should be able to come in and vote for a week. Stuff like that. Let's see. Let me read the specific part. So, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person's life or property without due process of law, or deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. When the 14th Amendment was used in the Bush v. Gore case, basically to, because within the whole part and equal protection of the laws, like you're giving different protections and applying the law differently with absentee or this mass mail-in system. I don't think this mass mail-in system is ever going to happen again. So I hope that the Democrats really got what they wanted by getting Trump out of office and putting Biden in, because they're never going to have another chance to do that shit again. Mm-hmm. And if it happens again, you're going to have mass protests, because, you're not going to have 73 million spurned people that aren't going to take to the streets to be like, no, we're not doing mail-in voting. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think, because that creates such a different system, that it's going to create a ruling is going to come down that's basically going to make it so everybody's votes have to be deemed the same, and they're going to have to be in by election. They're going to have to, have the same security verifications and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's going to, I'm not sure which amendment it might be under this one, where they can justify a reason to force all of the states to purge their voter rolls. Mm-hmm. Because you're not getting equal protection under the law if you have dead people voting somehow. Which, I mean, in my opinion, even if you just have proof of one dead person voting in a state, that would be enough. That should be enough cause to purge the voter rolls. Mm-hmm. And then tell everybody, okay, come and vote, re-register to vote, all that kind of stuff. Because I think that's the biggest problem. When you have people in Michigan that died in the 80s that they proved voted, mm-hmm. It's a big problem. So I think what I hope happens with these lawsuits of Trump is that we get some kind of like federal standardized protections for elections under the 14th Amendment, where they're forced to be more secure. Because you can't, if people have to get to come in person and vote, their vote should not be able to be counted out, because that's even if there's no voter ID or anything like that, it's still at least one person coming in and voting. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If they don't get the same protections by having it be, okay, somebody who does an absentee ballot or mails in a vote, where it's a 1-to-1, if you can't prove that everybody's only voting once and stuff like this, and that the people who want to vote are voting the same way they do when they're in person, that, in my opinion, violates the 14th Amendment. So I'm hoping that we get fair elections moving forward, because America has a history of shoddy elections. They do.
Oh, absolutely.
We really do. So, especially in these histories, the history of these cities that are in question have always had bad elections, for the most part. Mm-hmm. Philly and Detroit and Las Vegas in particular.
Cut the episode short. Sorry about that, guys. Having some audio and recording difficulties. But if you guys like it, listen. If you don't, eat biscuits. Have a great day.